The day I decided to move my father's inheritance was the day I realized my husband no longer looked at me the same way. It wasn't one dramatic moment.
It was smaller than that.
Quieter. David Morgan had always been confident. That was part of what made him successful as the managing director of Morgan Group, our family's mid-sized but powerful tech infrastructure company in San Francisco. Confidence used to look good on him. Lately, it looked like calculation. For 12 years, I had been the quiet half of the marriage. The calm one. The supportive wife who stayed out of boardroom politics while David ran the operational side of the company. But Morgan Group wasn't originally his. It was my father's. When my father died 2 years ago, the company passed to me as the majority shareholder. David remained CEO, mostly because my father trusted him and because at the time so did I. Publicly, nothing changed. Privately, everything did. My father left me something else besides the company. An inheritance most people in Silicon Valley would politely describe as significant. $87 million. It sat in a trust account managed by a private bank in San Francisco. My father had built strict protections around it before he passed away. But there was one clause. If I chose to transfer the funds personally, the money could move into a private asset protection structure under my sole control. For 2 years, I left it untouched. Until 3 weeks ago. That morning I woke up before David, something I rarely did. He was asleep beside me, his phone glowing softly on the nightstand as notifications appeared one after another. Normally I would ignore it, but something about the frequency bothered me. I glanced at the screen. A message preview appeared before it locked again. Lily C. I didn't know any Lily. The text was short. Miss you already. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't wake him up. I simply rolled over and stared at the ceiling while a very cold realization began forming in my mind. It wasn't jealousy. It was instinct. David had been distant for months. Late meetings. Sudden business trips. Vague explanations about marketing strategy and expansion planning. And one more thing. 3 weeks earlier, he had casually asked about the structure of my father's inheritance. Not the company. The inheritance. At the time I answered politely. Now the question felt different. By 9 a.m., I was sitting in the private office of my father's old financial advisor at Grant and Wilcox Private Banking. Claire, Martin said carefully, folding his hands across the desk. You've never shown interest in activating the asset protection clause before. I know. He studied my face. Has something happened? I smiled the way I had learned to smile during corporate negotiations.
Calm.
Neutral. Controlled. I'd simply like to reorganize my personal assets. He nodded slowly. Once the transfer happens, your husband will have no visibility into the account. That's the point. Martin hesitated for only a moment before turning his screen toward me. The numbers appeared. $87 million. Even after 2 years, the amount still looked unreal. Where would you like the funds placed? He asked. I want a protected account under my name only, I said. No marital access. No corporate connection. He typed quietly. This structure will also prevent claims in the event of divorce. I held his gaze. Perfect. The transfer process took 20 minutes. 20 quiet, clinical minutes that moved $87 million out of the family trust and into a personal asset protection structure David couldn't touch. When it was finished, Martin printed a confirmation sheet and slid it across the desk.
Done.
I folded the paper carefully and placed it in my purse. Outside the bank, the San Francisco morning looked normal. People walked past with coffee. Cable cars rattled down California Street. Nothing about the city suggested my marriage might already be over. But as I stood there on the sidewalk, another realization settled into my mind. If David was hiding something, he believed I didn't know. And that belief might become my greatest advantage. So I went home. I kissed my husband on the cheek. And I said nothing. 3 days after moving the inheritance, I saw my husband buying a diamond necklace for another woman. The strange part wasn't the necklace. It was how calm I felt when I saw it. That afternoon, I had gone to the Westfield Luxury Mall in downtown San Francisco. One of our senior board members was celebrating his retirement, and I wanted to buy a formal gift. Something tasteful. Something expensive enough to look appropriate for the occasion. Cartier was the obvious choice. I walked through the marble corridors slowly, enjoying the quiet anonymity. Being the owner of a technology company in Silicon Valley meant people sometimes recognized my name in business settings, but here I was just another well-dressed woman carrying a leather handbag. At least that's what I believed when I stepped toward the Cartier boutique. Then I saw David. He was standing inside the store near the central display counter. And he wasn't alone. At first, I only saw the back of him. Tall, confident posture, one hand resting casually on the glass case while he leaned slightly toward the woman beside him. Then she turned.
Young.
Very young. Blonde hair pulled into a loose professional ponytail. A fitted gray blazer over a white blouse. I recognized her after a second. Lily Carter, a junior marketing assistant who had joined Morgan Group about 8 months earlier. She laughed softly at something David said. Not the polite laugh employees give executives. This was different. Personal. David picked up a small velvet tray from the counter while the Cartier sales associate stood nearby with a practiced smile of someone witnessing a romantic purchase. On the tray sat a necklace. White gold. A delicate chain. And at the center, a diamond large enough to reflect the boutique lights in sharp flashes. Lily touched the pendant carefully. "Oh my God," she said, her voice quiet but excited. "David, that's way too much." Too much. The words hung in the air between them. David smiled. The same charming smile he used at investor meetings.
"Try it on," he said.
The associate stepped forward immediately. Within seconds, the necklace was around Lily's neck. She turned toward the mirror behind the display counter, her fingers lightly brushing the diamond as she admired the reflection. David stepped closer behind her. Not touching, but close enough that the intimacy was obvious. "It's perfect," he said softly. My chest tightened. But not from heartbreak. From clarity. Because in that moment, I finally understood something important. This wasn't a random affair. This was confidence. David wasn't acting like a man hiding something. He was acting like a man who believed there would never be consequences. The associate returned with a tablet. "Would you like me to prepare the purchase, sir?" David nodded. "Yes." Lily looked nervous again. "David, this is insane." He chuckled quietly. "You deserve it." I stood outside the boutique entrance, partially hidden behind a pillar, watching everything unfold like a silent observer. A few shoppers passed me without noticing. Inside the boutique, the associate typed something into the payment terminal. "Will you be using the same card as usual, Mr. Morgan?" David pulled a sleek black credit card from his wallet and handed it over. I recognized it immediately. Morgan Group Executive Platinum. A company-funded card reserved for senior leadership expenses. Technically legitimate. If the purchase was business-related. A diamond necklace for a marketing assistant was not business-related. The associate placed the card into the terminal. Lily leaned closer to David again. "You're going to spoil me," she whispered. He laughed softly. The sound felt strangely distant to me. Because, while they stood there enjoying their moment, a very different thought had already formed in my mind. I didn't feel the urge to storm into the store. I didn't want to scream. I didn't even feel angry. Instead, I slowly pulled my phone from my purse. If David believed I was still the quiet, trusting wife he had married, then perhaps it was time to let him keep believing that. For just a little longer. I didn't walk into the Cartier boutique. Instead, I stepped back into the corridor and found a quiet corner near a marble column. From there I could still see them through the glass. David stood confidently beside Lily, while the sales associate waited for the payment terminal to process the card. Lily kept touching the diamond necklace at her throat like someone who couldn't believe her luck. The scene would have looked romantic to anyone else. To me, it looked careless. Very careless. I opened my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I reached the number for our corporate banking support line. Morgan Group used a premium banking service for executive accounts, which meant calls were answered almost immediately. The line connected within seconds. "Good afternoon, Priority Client Services." "My name is Claire Morgan," I said calmly. "I need to report a stolen corporate card." There was a brief pause. "I'm sorry to hear that, Mrs. Morgan. Can you provide the last 4 digits?" I knew them. David used that card constantly at company dinners and conferences. 4172. The representative typed quickly. I see the account. When was the card stolen? Possibly this morning, I replied. My husband noticed it missing. Technically, that wasn't even a lie. He just hadn't noticed yet. The representative's tone became more serious. For security purposes, we'll immediately block the card and decline any current transactions. Thank you, I said softly. Behind the glass wall of the boutique, the associate looked down at the payment terminal. Then she frowned. She tried again. David leaned slightly toward the counter, still relaxed. The associate spoke quietly. I'm sorry, Mr. Morgan, the transaction didn't go through. David looked mildly confused. That's strange. Try again.
She did.
The machine beeped again. This time the sound carried faintly through the boutique.
Declined.
David's posture stiffened slightly. I apologize, the associate said, clearly uncomfortable now. The card has been reported as stolen. Lily turned toward him. Stolen. Several customers browsing nearby glanced over. David forced a small laugh. That's impossible. The associate handed the card back across the counter. The system has blocked it, sir. You may want to contact your bank. David's jaw tightened. For the first time since I arrived, he looked uncertain. He pulled out his phone and stepped slightly away from the counter, clearly planning to call the bank himself. Lily remained near the mirror, the diamond necklace still around her neck. Her expression had changed. The excitement was gone. Now she looked embarrassed. The associate waited awkwardly, unsure whether to remove the necklace or continue the sale. A couple browsing watches nearby were openly watching now. I ended the call with the bank and slipped my phone back into my purse. Inside the boutique, David lowered his phone slowly. He hadn't called yet. Instead, he stared at the credit card in his hand as if it had betrayed him. The associate spoke again, gently. Would you like to try another form of payment, sir? Lily stepped closer to him. David, it's fine. We can come back later. Her voice was quieter now, less confident. David hated embarrassment. Anyone who worked with him knew that. He was the type of man who carefully controlled every room he walked into. Right now, that control was slipping. I watched the tension building inside the boutique. The curious glances from strangers. The sales associate trying to remain professional. Lily beginning to look like someone who regretted being there. And David trying to understand why something that should have been simple was suddenly going wrong. That was when I decided it was time for the second act. I adjusted my jacket, smoothed my hair, and walked calmly toward the boutique entrance. Because the most powerful humiliation isn't loud. Sometimes it arrives wearing the perfect smile of a supportive wife. When I stepped into the Cartier boutique, no one noticed me at first. All attention was still focused on David. He stood at the counter with that rigid posture I knew too well, the one he used when something had gone wrong, but he refused to admit it publicly. Lily stood beside him, her fingers nervously touching the diamond necklace still hanging around her neck. The sales associate looked trapped between professionalism and discomfort. And then David saw me. For a split second, his entire body froze. Claire? The surprise in his voice was genuine. I let a warm smile appear on my face, the kind that had reassured investors and journalists for years. David, I said gently, walking toward him. There you are. The associate looked relieved that someone seemed to know him. Lily, however, suddenly looked like she wished she could disappear into the polished marble floor. I stopped beside my husband and placed a light hand on his arm. I was wondering why the bank just called me. David blinked. The bank. I nodded, keeping my voice calm and friendly. They said our executive card had been flagged for suspicious activity. The associate immediately straightened. Yes, ma'am. The system reported the card as stolen. I gave her an apologetic smile. That must have been the automated security alert. Our bank can be overly cautious. David stared at me, clearly trying to process what was happening. I turned to Lily. And you must be Lily Carter, I said pleasantly. Her eyes widened slightly. Yes, Mrs. Morgan. Of course she knew who I was. Everyone at Morgan Group knew who owned the company. I tilted my head slightly, admiring the necklace. That's beautiful on you. She flushed. Oh, this? I was just trying it on. The lie came out too quickly. David jumped in immediately. It's a marketing gift, he said, for the new campaign launch. A marketing gift. For a junior assistant. From Cartier. I almost admired the speed of the lie. I nodded thoughtfully, as if it made perfect sense. That's generous of you. The associate cleared her throat politely. Would you like to attempt the transaction again with another card? David hesitated. Just long enough for me to understand something important. He hadn't expected to be caught like this. But he was already adjusting. Already building a new version of the story. Classic David. I'll handle it later, he said quickly. We should get back to the office. Lily immediately began removing the necklace, her hands slightly shaky now. The associate took it carefully and returned it to the velvet tray. The sparkling diamond disappeared back into the display case. The moment was over. But the information I needed had already revealed itself. Because during those few minutes inside the boutique, I had confirmed 3 things. First, David was absolutely involved with Lily. The way they looked at each other made that obvious. Second, he was comfortable using company resources for her, which meant he believed no one would question him. And third, he had no idea I was watching closely. As we walked out of the boutique together, David placed a casual hand on my back. The gesture looked affectionate to anyone watching. Small world, he said lightly. Running into you here. I smiled. Yes, I replied calmly. Small world. But inside my mind, something had shifted. Because humiliation was never my real goal. Information was. And now I had enough curiosity to start asking much more serious questions. That night, while David slept peacefully beside me, I opened my laptop. And for the first time in our marriage, I began quietly investigating my own husband. That night David fell asleep almost immediately. He always did. Within minutes his breathing became slow and steady beside me, the soft rhythm of someone completely at ease with his life. I lay still in the dark, staring at the ceiling. The image of Lily standing in that boutique kept replaying in my mind. The way David stood behind her. The way she whispered to him. The way he didn't even hesitate before inventing a lie. A marketing gift. I quietly slipped out of bed. By midnight, I was sitting in my home office with the lights dimmed and my laptop open. Morgan Group's internal financial system required executive authentication, but as majority owner, I had administrative access to every department, including expense approvals, including consulting contracts, including executive credit card statements. For 12 years, I had trusted David to manage most operational finances. I preferred strategy, partnerships, long-term planning. He preferred control. Tonight, that control became a liability. I logged into the system. The first thing I opened was the executive expense ledger. David's corporate card history appeared on the screen. Restaurants,
Flights.
hotel bookings, conference expenses. All normal. Until I filtered the data. Vendor category, marketing consulting. A list appeared. One name repeated again and again. Carter Consulting, LLC. I leaned closer to the screen. The payments were small enough not to attract immediate attention. $30,000 here. $45,000 there. But when I scrolled through the last 12 months, the total reached almost $600,000. My stomach tightened. Lily Carter, the junior marketing assistant, consulting company owner? That alone would have violated company conflict of interest policy. But the details became worse when I opened the invoices. Travel reimbursement, luxury hotel stays, conference expenses that never existed, fake project descriptions. Every document had been approved by one person, David Morgan. For a long moment, I simply stared at the screen. This wasn't just an affair. This was financial misconduct. Corporate money redirected quietly into the hands of his mistress. And if these records were accurate, he had been doing it for nearly a year. I closed my laptop slowly. Then I picked up my phone. There was one person my father trusted more than any financial auditor. A forensic accountant named Samuel Hargrove. He had helped my father uncover a supplier fraud scheme almost a decade earlier. It was nearly 1 in the morning, but Samuel answered on the second ring. Claire? I need a confidential review of Morgan Group's internal finances, I said quietly. He paused. That sounds serious. It might be. There was another short silence. Do you suspect internal theft? I looked back at the glowing laptop screen, at the line of invoices bearing Lily Carter's name. Yes, I said. I do. Samuel spoke carefully. If you want this done properly, we'll need to examine executive approvals, vendor records, travel logs, everything. That's exactly what I want. He exhaled slowly. I can meet you tomorrow night. Not tomorrow, I said. Tonight. Another pause. Then a quiet answer. Send me the access credentials. An hour later, Samuel sat across from me at the desk, his glasses reflecting the laptop light as he scrolled through the records. For 20 minutes, he said nothing. Then he leaned back slowly. Well, he murmured. That's creative. How bad? I asked. He turned the screen toward me. Payment chains. Linked vendors. Hidden reimbursements. Money routed through shell service agreements. The total number appeared at the bottom of the spreadsheet. $1,240,000. Over $1 million. Samuel tapped the screen. This isn't sloppy, he said. It's deliberate. I felt strangely calm as the truth settled in. David hadn't just betrayed our marriage. He had stolen from my company. From my father's legacy. Samuel looked at me carefully. What are you planning to do? I closed the laptop. Nothing, I said. At least not yet. Because for the first time since the Cartier boutique, I finally understood the scale of David's confidence. He believed he was untouchable, and that belief would make what came next much easier. I looked at Samuel. I think it's time to give my husband a new opportunity. Samuel frowned slightly. What kind of opportunity? I allowed a small smile. The kind that comes with complete financial responsibility. 3 days later, I offered my husband the opportunity he had been dreaming about. David was sitting across from me at the breakfast table, scrolling through his phone while barely touching his coffee. Morning light poured through the kitchen windows, casting long shadows across the marble counter. To anyone watching, we looked like the same successful couple we had always been. But now I knew what was hiding beneath the surface. And more importantly, I knew how much he had already taken. $1.24 million. Samuel had spent 2 nights quietly verifying every transaction. Fake consulting payments. Reimbursement fraud. Travel expenses that were never tied to real company work. Every path led back to one person, Lily Carter. And every approval signature belonged to David. The strange part was how calm I felt now. Anger had already passed. What replaced it was something colder. Strategy. David glanced up from his phone. You're quiet this morning. I've been thinking about the Nevada project, I said. That got his attention immediately. Morgan Group had been exploring a renewable energy infrastructure expansion in rural Nevada for nearly a year. Solar installations, battery storage systems, long-term energy contracts. The project had potential, but it also carried risk. Land acquisition complications, regulatory approvals, construction delays. We had postponed the launch twice already. David leaned back slightly. The board still isn't ready to approve that, he said. I am, I replied. He frowned. As majority shareholder? Yes. Now the interest in his eyes sharpened. Renewable energy contracts could generate hundreds of millions over time. If the Nevada project succeeded, whoever controlled it would gain enormous influence inside the company. I folded my hands calmly. I've been too cautious, I continued. My father built Morgan Group by taking calculated risks. David's posture straightened. And you want me to run it? Not a question. An assumption. I smiled faintly. I want you to lead it. For a moment, he looked almost surprised by how easily the opportunity appeared. Then the confidence returned. You realize that project would need independent financial authority, he said. Construction budgets, vendor contracts, operational control. I know. And the board. I'll handle the board. David leaned forward now, fully engaged. This could turn into a billion-dollar division if it's structured properly. I'm aware. His eyes gleamed with the same ambition that had impressed my father years ago. But now I recognized another layer beneath it.
Greed.
He was already calculating what control of a new division might mean for him personally. Independence, influence, possibly even leverage over the company itself. Exactly what I needed him to believe. "I want someone I trust managing the finances directly," I said softly. David nodded. "You can trust me." The words were almost poetic. Trust. The one thing he had already destroyed. "I'll authorize a new project account," I continued. "You'll have direct responsibility for vendor contracts and construction spending." He didn't even hesitate. "I'll start organizing the Nevada team today." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand gently. "I knew I could count on you." His smile was confident again. Victorious, even. Because in his mind, this project wasn't just work. It was freedom. A private financial kingdom growing inside Morgan Group. A chance to build something that belonged to him. What he didn't know was that the project account would be monitored more closely than any financial operation in the company. Every dollar, every contract, every decision. And if David continued doing what he had already been doing, the evidence would multiply. Not quietly, but catastrophically. As he left the house that morning, he kissed me on the cheek. "Thank you for believing in me," he said. I watched him walk out the front door. Then I opened my laptop and forwarded Samuel the new project account details. Because sometimes the best way to expose a thief is to give him a bigger vault. 2 weeks later, David left for Nevada with the confidence of a man who believed his life was about to expand. He stood in our bedroom that morning adjusting his watch while speaking about construction timelines and energy contracts like a visionary CEO preparing for his greatest project. "The land looks promising," he said. "Solar capacity out there is incredible. If we structure the storage systems right, we could dominate the regional grid." I sat on the edge of the bed, listening quietly. "What about housing?" I asked. "We'll arrange temporary executive accommodations," he said. "Probably lease something near Reno until construction stabilizes." Temporary executive accommodations. That was what he believed. What he didn't know was that the Nevada project had already run into multiple complications months earlier. Land title disputes, permits delayed by environmental reviews, and, most importantly, corporate funding restrictions that required board approval before any major payments could be released. The account I had opened for him existed, but the money inside it was carefully limited. David finished packing his suitcase and walked over to kiss me goodbye. "I'll send you photos when the site is ready," he said. I smiled warmly. "I'm proud of you." He left for the airport an hour later. What he didn't know, and what I had confirmed through Samuel 2 days earlier, was that he wasn't traveling alone. Lily Carter had booked a flight to Reno that same afternoon. Not through company channels. Through a private reservation. And she wasn't listed as a Morgan Group employee on the trip, which meant David had invited her personally. Samuel forwarded me the reservation confirmation the moment it appeared. I imagine the conversation they must have had. Nevada. A new project. A private opportunity. In David's mind, the trip probably felt like the beginning of a new life. Perhaps even a new future with Lily. A future funded by the company he thought he controlled. That evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Samuel. They arrived. Attached was a photo taken by the investigator he had hired in Reno. David and Lily standing outside the airport terminal. She was smiling brightly, wearing sunglasses and holding his arm. They looked like a couple on vacation. I leaned back in my chair and waited. 4 hours later, another message arrived. This one included several photos. The construction site. Or rather, what passed for one. Dry desert land stretching across miles of empty Nevada terrain. 2 rusted trailers. A half-finished access road. And a temporary construction sign, leaning crookedly in the wind. No luxury housing. No finished buildings. No corporate infrastructure. Just a struggling project trapped in legal disputes. Samuel called a minute later. "They're not happy," he said. "What happened?" "The funding request David submitted this afternoon was automatically flagged." Of course it was. He tried authorizing several vendor payments. And All blocked pending board approval. I could almost picture his face at that moment. Confusion first, then frustration. Samuel continued. He's been on the phone with accounting for the last hour. And Lily? Still there. Probably expecting the luxury lifestyle he had promised her. Private housing, corporate perks, a glamorous executive project in the Nevada desert. Instead, she had arrived at a stalled construction site with frozen funds and legal disputes surrounding the land. Samuel chuckled quietly. I don't think this is the romantic business trip she imagined. I looked out the window toward the San Francisco skyline glowing in the distance. Good, I said calmly, because David had just entered the most dangerous stage of his own plan. Desperation. And desperate people make mistakes. Mistakes that leave evidence. Evidence that boards of directors, corporate lawyers, and criminal investigators take very seriously. 3 days after David arrived in Nevada, Lily Carter contacted me. Not politely. Not cautiously. She contacted me like someone who believed she had discovered a devastating secret. It was late afternoon in San Francisco when the message appeared on my phone. I had just finished reviewing quarterly reports when an unknown number flashed across the screen. Attached were several images. Bank transfers. Company payment confirmations. Screenshots of messages. And finally a photo. David and Lily standing together on a balcony somewhere in Reno, his arm wrapped around her waist while she leaned against him, smiling directly at the camera. Below the images was a single text. I thought you should know what your husband is really doing. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I opened the attachments one by one. The documents were real. Consulting payments. Travel reimbursements. Transfers from Morgan Group accounts that Samuel and I had already identified weeks earlier. Lily had clearly gone through David's files. Probably during one of their long, frustrated nights at that miserable Nevada site. And now she believed she had the perfect weapon. She thought she was exposing the affair. Destroying my marriage. What she didn't understand was that she had just handed me the final pieces of evidence. I leaned back in my chair and reread the message. There was anger behind it. Desperation. Which meant something had already gone wrong between them. I imagined the scene. David promising luxury and opportunity. Lily arriving in Nevada expecting a glamorous executive project. Instead finding a dusty construction site, frozen budgets, and a man slowly realizing he had far less control than he thought. And now she wanted revenge. But she had chosen the wrong target. My phone buzzed again. Another message from the same number. You deserve to know the truth. I allowed myself a small smile. The truth. If only she knew how much of it I already had. I opened Samuel's contact and forwarded every attachment. A minute later he called. Well, he said after reviewing the files. That's generous of her. Very. These messages confirm personal involvement with the vendor receiving the payments. Yes. And the transfers themselves are clearly unauthorized. Yes. He chuckled softly. Your husband's mistress just strengthened the embezzlement case. I walked to the window, overlooking the city while we spoke. Evening traffic flowed through San Francisco like glowing rivers of light. So what do we do now? Samuel asked. Nothing, I said calmly. For a little longer. Because the moment Lily sent those files, she unknowingly triggered the final stage of everything I had been preparing. The board of directors. Morgan Group had 7 board members. 6 of them trusted me. But corporate accusations required proof. Clear documentation. Undeniable financial records. Samuel now had all of it. Internal ledgers. Fake consulting invoices. Travel reimbursements. And now, direct confirmation from Lily herself. I turned back toward my desk. Schedule an emergency board meeting, I said. Samuel understood immediately. David won't see it coming. No, I replied quietly. He won't. Because at that very moment, somewhere in the Nevada desert, my husband was probably still trying to convince Lily that everything would work out, that the money would come through, that the project would make them both rich. And soon he would return to San Francisco. Confident. Unprepared. walking directly into a room full of people who were about to learn exactly what he had been doing. Sometimes betrayal destroys a marriage, but sometimes it destroys an entire career. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for Monday morning at 9 a.m. David returned from Nevada late Sunday night. He walked into the house looking exhausted, sunburned from the desert heat, and irritated in the quiet way he always became when things didn't go according to his plans. I was sitting on the couch with a book when he came in. "How was Nevada?" I asked gently. He loosened his tie and dropped his suitcase beside the stairs. "Complicated," he said. "Permits, contractors, local disputes, the usual mess." I nodded sympathetically. "That's why the board trusts you." He sighed and sat down beside me. "I'll need additional funding authorization soon," he continued. "The initial project account is too restricted." Of course it was. "That's something we could discuss with the board," I said calmly. He frowned slightly. "The board?" "Yes," I replied, closing my book. "I scheduled a meeting tomorrow morning. We should update them on the project." He hesitated for a second. Then he shrugged.
Fine.
That might help move things forward. If he felt any concern, he hid it well. David had always believed he could control any room he walked into. The next morning, we arrived at Morgan Group headquarters together. The boardroom sat on the top floor of our building overlooking the San Francisco Bay. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline, and the long walnut conference table already had 6 people seated around it when we entered. Every board member, every corporate attorney, and Samuel. David noticed him immediately. His steps slowed. "Why is Hargrove here?" he asked quietly. I gave him a polite smile. "Financial transparency." He didn't like that answer, but it was too late to question it. We took our seats. The chairman cleared his throat. "Claire requested this meeting regarding financial concerns within Morgan Group." David turned toward me. "What concerns?" I folded my hands calmly on the table. "The Nevada project can wait," I said. The room became very quiet. Samuel opened a folder and slid several printed documents across the table. Bank transfers, consulting invoices, corporate expense reports, every one of them bearing David's approval signature. David looked down at the papers. At first his expression showed confusion, then recognition, then something colder. "What is this?" he asked. Samuel spoke evenly. "These are payments authorized by you over the past 12 months. David's jaw tightened. "Marketing consulting." Samuel slid another sheet forward. "A corporate registration record. Carter Consulting, LLC. Owner, Lily Carter." One of the board members leaned forward. "Our junior marketing assistant?" he asked. No one spoke. Samuel continued. "The payments total $1,240,000. The room filled with silence, so heavy it almost felt physical. David finally looked at me. "This is ridiculous." I met his gaze calmly. "There's more." Samuel placed the final documents on the table. Screenshots. Messages. The files Lily had sent me. One of the board members slowly removed his glasses. "David," he said carefully, "are you in a personal relationship with this employee?" David stood abruptly. "This is a setup." His voice echoed sharply against the glass walls. "You think I'd risk my career for something like this?" I tilted my head slightly. "You already did." The chairman spoke again. "David Morgan, effective immediately you are suspended as CEO of Morgan Group pending a full financial investigation." David stared at him. "You can't be serious." I slid one final document across the table. A legal notice prepared by the company's attorneys. "Actually," I said quietly, "we are." He picked up the paper. His face went pale. "Claire, Morgan Group is filing civil action against you for financial misconduct and embezzlement," I continued calmly. Around the table, every board member was watching him now. The confident executive they had trusted for years. The man who thought he controlled everything. And suddenly, he looked very small. "You planned this," he said hoarsely. I stood slowly. "No," I replied. "You planned it." Then I turned to the board. "And now we're simply correcting the consequences." The silence in the boardroom lasted several seconds after I finished speaking. David was still standing at the end of the table, holding the legal notice like it might suddenly change if he stared at it long enough. It didn't. The document was simple. Morgan Group versus David Morgan. Financial misconduct. Embezzlement. Breach of fiduciary duty. Demanded damages. $1.24 million plus legal penalties. David slowly lowered the paper. "You're destroying your own husband," he said quietly. One of the board members exhaled sharply. "You destroyed yourself," the chairman replied before I could answer. David ignored him. His eyes stayed locked on me. "Claire, we can fix this." The desperation in his voice was new. I had never heard it before. "People make mistakes," he continued. "We can settle this privately. No courts. No scandal." For a moment, no one in the room moved. Then I answered. "You didn't make a mistake." I nodded toward the documents spread across the table. "You created a system. Fake invoices. Shell consulting contracts. Unauthorized transfers. A year of carefully hidden theft." Samuel added quietly, "And that's only the financial evidence." David's expression shifted again. "What does that mean?" Samuel opened another folder. Corporate policy violations. Abuse of executive authority. Undisclosed personal relationship with a subordinate receiving company funds. The chairman leaned back slowly. "David, this isn't the misunderstanding." David's confidence finally collapsed. His shoulders dropped. The man who once controlled every meeting, every negotiation, every room, now looked like someone who had suddenly realized the game was already over. He looked at me one last time. "You set me up." I shook my head.
No.
"You simply believed I wasn't paying attention." Two security officers stepped quietly into the boardroom. Corporate protocol during executive termination meetings. The chairman spoke calmly. "David Morgan, your employment with Morgan Group is terminated effective immediately." One of the guards gestured toward the door. David didn't resist. He just looked at me again. For a moment, I saw the man I had married 12 years earlier. Ambitious. Confident. Certain the world would always work in his favor. But that version of him no longer existed. Without another word, he walked out. The door closed behind him. The chairman turned to me. "You'll assume interim leadership of the company?" "I already have," I said. The legal proceedings moved faster than David expected. Much faster. Because corporate fraud cases involving clear financial documentation rarely take long. Within weeks, the investigation uncovered everything Samuel had predicted. The fake consulting contracts. The personal relationship with Lily Carter. The attempt to redirect corporate funds through shell invoices. When investigators questioned Lily, she cooperated almost immediately. The moment she realized the company already had the full financial trail, her confidence disappeared. She became a witness. David became the defendant. 6 months later, the court delivered its final decision. Corporate fraud. Financial misconduct. Prison sentence for years. Civil damages to Morgan Group. $1.24 million plus legal penalties. Lily Carter quietly disappeared from the technology industry after the trial. And Morgan Group recovered faster than anyone expected. The board officially appointed me CEO 3 weeks after the verdict. At first, the press treated it like a scandal story. The betrayed wife who took over the company. But over time, the headlines changed. Quarterly profits improved. The renewable energy division was rebuilt properly. The Nevada project, once David's fantasy of independence, eventually became one of our most profitable investments. 2 years later, I stood in my office overlooking the San Francisco skyline. The same view David once believed belonged to him. Samuel knocked lightly and stepped inside. "The investors from Seattle arrived," he said. "Good," I replied. As he turned to leave, he paused. "You never seemed surprised by how everything turned out." I smiled faintly. "Because it didn't happen suddenly." He nodded slowly. "Preparation. Patience. Quiet decisions made long before the final moment arrived." After he left, I looked out across the city again. Somewhere far from this building, David Morgan was finishing another day inside a prison cell. People often ask if I hate him. The truth is simpler than that. I don't think about him very often. Because, in the end, I didn't destroy him. He destroyed himself.